I did sit through a little bit of Le Grand Chariot, the Plough by Philippe Garrel. But since I didn't see it all, I'll let you tell all.
Yeah. So something we've said about, obviously Garrel's Le Révélateur, what is an explosive, miasmic strangulation of a film. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing document, or I suppose of rebellion and angst from the 60s. But he has subsequently become he kind of René'd himself in a way, the way that René often ended up making quite middling films.
Oh God, René's last films are
these quite trifling little minor works.
Yeah.
And I think there's this sense the drop off in French filmmakers in that sense. So what we get with this film, it explores the kind of tragedies and destinies and lives of this family and kind of expanded family of puppeteers. Which is in theory quite interesting. It's not something I've necessarily seen on film before or anything. But I found it very cold-blooded in a lot of ways. So I think it's got shades of Roma because it's these kind of crisscrossing romantic relationships, and the characters are often unable to really explicate or articulate their desiring, and it often leads to sort of misunderstandings and switch arounds. People change partner a couple of times. They struggle to assert themselves in the way that they want to, because this puppet business is really a real drag for a lot of them in a way. It's orchestrated by the father who dies, this kind of charismatic father who dies, and then they have to kind of decide what they want with this thing they've inherited, and it means they kind of fragment in their own different ways. But whereas Roma is perfect at presenting us with kind of mercurially irritating characters whose irritations make them very, very, for the most part, I think it's not always the case, but for the most part make them really, really likable and interesting. Whereas these characters were just kind of annoying and an irritant, particularly one of the young men who has a dalliance with a woman in the film, who for the 90% of the film, I thought it was one of the other women. I didn't realize these were two separate women. And it was only a little bit later, after a lot, kind of like squinting at the screen, I realized it was an entirely different woman. And that wasn't like an intentional kind of disruptive effect. It was just that he cast three almost identical looking brunette women.
It's funny, like when you're like, obviously, like even like, we like, what am I saying?
Yeah.
They all look the same. It's like we can't like tell a bunch of white people apart. Like it's like you as a director, you never really think like, oh, I should make sure I don't cast people who look the same, because in your head you're like working with these people every day. You obviously assume they're
fully fleshed out
characters. But actually, loads of people look quite similar to each other, and it's that you do actually need, as well as costume, you do need to sort of, just on an aesthetic level, you need a kind of distinguishment, I feel.
Yeah, or even just, it says a lot, it speaks a lot about the kind of flatness of the scripts, I think, in a way that these two women they merged for me, because they weren't distinct enough.
And were they meant to merge in an interesting way? Usually not, right?
No. And I think, so yeah, I mean, it was nicely shot, and I think there was a certain charm to it, I think, so I didn't find it terrible. I just found it okay, but I found it quite a little bit bloodless for what it was trying to do. I think it kind of saves itself a little bit in the final 20 minutes, where one of the men, who's sort of like an apprentice to the family, sort of decides to pursue painting and struggles to create, because he doesn't want to compromise his work by distributing it through a gallery, and kind of rejects. It's a great scene where he kind of rejects a potential buyer who wants to buy some paintings, but they're not finished, so he kind of sends this guy away, and then kind of has this mental breakdown. He slashes all his paintings in the metro, which is great, and then gets committed to an asylum. And it's very good, because it's like he's not like, it's not hysterical madness, and he's got in this kind of sort of slightly unusual bliss state almost in this asylum, and those scenes are very nice at the end, and they have a kind of Mia Hansen love kind of quality about them. He's
circling that sort of thing, isn't he? But he doesn't quite find
land.
The real distinctive Philippe Garrel was in the 60s and 70s, and and he hasn't found a new. He's changed so radically,
Mm.
and he hasn't found a voice in this new.
No. Well,
New
I also
phase.
want to point out what is going on with films about fucking dementia at the moment, because the granny in this film also gets dementia. It's just everyone
Right,
seems to
yeah.
be fucking pulling the
Oh yeah, I
dementia
didn't like.
cord.
I do have to say I don't want to cast too many opinions about this film because I haven't seen it
Yeah.
really. But the scenes I did see at the beginning, where she's like asking them about they've been doing Extinction Rebellion protests or something, and she's like, "Oh, is it all right? Is it okay? You're safe?" You know,
Yeah.
she's like, check, and it's just like. It's just a bit.
Well, that's kind of Garrel, 'cause, you know,
like sure that conversation probably happens a lot, but like,
Mm.
why are we being shown it? What is it? What is it?
Well,
like,
because I suppose Garrel like created a powerful, enigmatic response to 68 in his early work, and now he's like, oh well, I used to be a proper rebel. I was, you know.
Yeah,
So
it
he's
does
kind of
feel
nodding
really
to that.
boomerist.
Yeah, it's very boomery.
It feels like someone who just like got property and just stops caring about anything.
So yeah, so
but he said everything he needs to say about the family in Le Révélateur, which is it's a completely wordless experimental film where a kind of anxious
couple and a child.
couple and a child sort of circle each other.
But this, it was charming
I don't know why
enough.
he doesn't know that.
I don't know. It was charming enough, but it felt very like a very minor work, and it hasn't really lingered with me, despite it was felt like a little bit of an effort to kind of chew through this particular play of Green's, I think.
Ghastly.